I'm Sadie, 29, sitting alone at a restaurant table, my birthday candles flickering. I'd reserved spots for my parents and sister, picturing laughter, clinking glasses, maybe even a hug. They swore they'd come. My phone buzzes. Mom's text reads, "You're not our priority right now." My chest tightens. The waiter's sympathetic glance burns. Why am I always waiting for them to show up? Have you ever felt invisible on a day meant for you? I'm sharing my story from Chicago. Hit like, subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from. Back in my apartment, the silence was louder than the restaurant's hum. I sat on my worn couch staring at the birthday cake I'd bought still in its box, the frosting probably sweating by now. My phone lay face down on the coffee table. Mom's text burned into my mind. I couldn't touch the cake. It felt like a relic of a night that never happened. My fingers twitched, wanting to call someone, anyone, to make sense of it. I grabbed my phone and dialed Harper, my sister, hoping she'd have answers. The call rang twice before she picked up. Harper's voice was clipped, like she was already halfway out the door. "Sadie, I'm swamped with work. Can this wait?" I swallowed my throat tight. "You didn't show up tonight. Neither did Mom and Dad. What's going on?" She sighed, a sound I knew too well, the one she used when she didn't want to deal. "I had a deadline. They probably got caught up." "It's not a big deal, is it?" "Not a big deal." I gripped the phone tighter, my nails digging into my palm. "It was my birthday, Harper. They texted me. I wasn't their priority." Silence stretched on her end. Then a quick, "I'm sorry. Okay, I'll call you tomorrow." She hung up before I could respond. I stared at the screen, her name fading to black. My sister, the one person I thought might get it, had just brushed me off like I was a nuisance. I tossed the phone onto the cushion and stood pacing the small living room. The hardwood creaked under my steps, each one heavier than the last. My eyes caught on a stack of photo albums tucked under the TV stand, gathering dust. I don't know why I pulled one out. Maybe I needed proof that my family wasn't always like this. I flipped through pages, the glossy prints sticking slightly to my fingers. There I was, gap-toothed at 7, grinning at a county fair with Mom holding my hand. Another of Dad teaching me to ride a bike, his smile wide and proud. But as the pages turned, the photos thinned. High school graduation, just me and Harper in caps and gowns, no parents in sight. Christmas 2 years ago, me alone by the tree, their chairs empty. My chest ached, a dull throb that spread like spilled ink. Had it always been this way? I'd told myself they were busy, that life got in the way. But the pattern was clear now, sharper than ever. I sank back onto the couch, the album open on my lap. A small drawing slipped out, one I'd made as a kid, a crayon sketch of our family under a rainbow. On the back, in Mom's neat cursive, was written, "We love you, Sadie." I traced the words, my finger trembling. When had that love turned into indifference? I needed to talk to someone who wouldn't dodge me. I texted Sienna, my best friend since college, who always had a way of cutting through my fog. "Can you talk family stuff?" Her reply came fast. "Call me now." Her voice was warm, steady when I dialed. "Sadie, what happened? You sound wrecked." I told her about the dinner, the text, Harper's brush-off. She listened, not interrupting until I ran out of words. "I'm not surprised," she said softly. "Your parents have been doing this for years. You deserve better." Her words hit like a cold splash of water. I wanted to argue, to defend them, but I couldn't. I keep thinking it's my fault, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. Like I'm not worth showing up for. Sienna's tone sharpened, but not unkindly. "That's not true. You've been carrying them forever, Sadie." "When was the last time they carried you?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. We talked until my voice grew hoarse, the clock ticking past midnight. Sienna mentioned she'd heard from a mutual friend that my parents were at a neighbor's party last night, not some urgent crisis. My stomach twisted. A party. They'd chosen a night of small talk and cheap wine over me. I hung up, promising to call her tomorrow, but the room felt smaller, the air heavier. I looked at the cake again, its cheerful pink icing mocking me. I wanted to scream, to throw it against the wall, but instead I just sat there, the weight of their choice pressing down my heart, caught between anger and something sharper, something I couldn't yet name. The weight in my chest didn't lift as I shoved the photo album back under the TV stand. My apartment felt like a cage, every corner holding a memory I didn't want to face. I grabbed my keys, needing air, needing movement. The city outside was quiet, the streetlights casting long shadows as I walked to the corner store, hoping a change of scene might dull the ache. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed, and I wandered the aisles, picking up a bag of chips I didn't want just to feel normal. At the checkout, the cashier, an older woman named Joyce, according to her name tag, smiled softly. "Rough night, hon?" she asked, scanning my chips. I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Family can be tough," she said, her eyes kind but knowing. "Mine forgot my 50th birthday last year." "Hurts, doesn't it?" I managed a tight smile, muttering, "Yeah, it does." Her words stuck with me as I walked home, the bag crinkling in my hand. Even a stranger could see what my family couldn't. Back on my couch, I didn't open the chips. Instead, I pulled out my laptop, desperate for a distraction. My email inbox was a mess, but one message caught my eye, a work newsletter from months ago, congratulating me on a project I'd led. My boss had called me indispensable, said I'd saved the campaign. I'd forwarded it to Mom and Dad, hoping for a proud of you. They never replied. I scrolled further, finding a birthday email I'd sent Dad last year, complete with a goofy e-card. No response to that either. The pattern was undeniable now, each ignored message a brick in the wall between us. I closed the laptop and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. My mind churned, piecing together moments I'd brushed off. The time I flew home for Thanksgiving, only to find them at a friend's house, leaving me with a cold turkey dinner. The weekend I helped them move, sweating through boxes while they laughed with neighbors over coffee. I'd always told myself I was overreacting, that families were messy, that love didn't need grand gestures. But Sienna's words echoed. "When was the last time they carried you?" I stood again, restless, and wandered to my kitchen. The fridge hummed, a steady reminder of the life I'd built alone. I opened it, staring at leftovers from meals I'd cooked for myself, no one else. My eyes landed on a bottle of wine I'd saved for a special occasion. I poured a glass, the red liquid catching the light. As I sipped, I thought of Harper's quick dismissal on the phone, her refusal to engage. She was only 25, but she'd always been their favorite, the one they called when they needed something. I'd never admitted how much that stung until now. I set the glass down, my hands shaking slightly. Sienna's mention of the neighbor's party kept circling in my head. I pulled up my phone, tempted to check their social media, but stopped myself. I didn't need photos to confirm what I already knew. They'd chosen a night of laughter and small talk over me, their daughter, on my birthday. The wine tasted bitter now, and I pushed it away. I grabbed a notebook from my desk, flipping to a blank page. I started writing, not sure what I was aiming for, just needing to get it out. The words spilled fast. "I'm tired of being invisible. I'm tired of waiting for you to see me. I'm tired of carrying your weight." I stopped, my pen hovering. The notebook felt heavier than it should, each word a release but also a wound. I thought of Joyce at the store, her quiet understanding. If a stranger could see my pain, why couldn't my family? The question burned, and I slammed the notebook shut, my breath uneven. I glanced at the clock, 2 a.m. My apartment was still, but my mind was a storm. I knew I couldn't stay here, trapped in this loop of hurt and questions. I needed to face them, to understand why they kept choosing everyone but me. The thought of driving to their house tomorrow sent a jolt through me, part dread, part resolve. Their text, Harper's indifference, the neighbor's party. They were pieces of a puzzle I'd ignored too long. I needed answers, and I wasn't going to wait for them to come to me anymore. The morning sun cut through my blinds, sharp and unforgiving, as I gripped my car keys. Sleep hadn't come easy, just a few restless hours haunted by that notebook page I'd filled with my hurt. I drove to my parents' house, the Chicago suburbs, blurring past, my stomach knotted with a mix of dread and determination. Their street was quiet, the kind of place where neighbors wave and nobody locks their doors. I parked in their driveway, noticing their car still dusty from last night's party. I knocked, then let myself in, the familiar creak of the door setting my nerves on edge. Mom was in the backyard, kneeling in her garden, clipping roses like nothing had happened. Dad was nearby, watering the lawn, humming to himself. The normalcy of it made my skin crawl. I stepped outside, this grass damp under my shoes. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Mom looked up, her gardening gloves streaked with dirt. "Sadie, you're here early. Everything okay?" Her tone was light, like she was asking about my day, not my birthday. I swallowed hard. "You didn't come last night. You texted me I wasn't your priority. What's so important?" Dad turned off the hose, his face tightening. "Don't start, Sadie. We were helping a friend. You know how it is." I crossed my arms, the air feeling colder. "Helping a friend? Sienna said you were at a neighbor's party." Mom's eyes flickered, caught off guard, but she recovered fast. "It was a last-minute thing. They needed us there. You're making this bigger than it is." Her words hit like a slap. I glanced at the kitchen window, spotting a party invitation pinned to their fridge, bright and festive, mocking me. "A party?" I said, my voice low. "You chose a party over my birthday." Dad stepped closer, his jaw set. "You're too sensitive, Sadie. We've got bigger problems than your dinner plans." My chest burned, his words slicing deeper than Mom's text. I wanted to scream, but I kept my voice even. "Bigger problems. Like what I've been paying your mortgage for 3 years. What's bigger than that?" Mom stood, brushing dirt off her knees, avoiding my eyes. "We appreciate that, honey. But family's about give and take. Give and take." I nearly laughed, the bitterness rising like bile. I'd given everything, my savings, my time, my heart, and they took it without a second thought. I turned away, needing air, and walked into the kitchen. The invitation stared at me, its cheerful font listing a barbecue at the Johnsons' house. I ripped it off the fridge, crumpling it in my fist. Mom followed me inside, her voice sharp now. "Sadie, don't be dramatic. We didn't mean to hurt you." I spun to face her. "Then why didn't you call? Why didn't you show up? You didn't even try." Her silence was louder than any answer. I noticed a new necklace around her neck, a delicate silver chain with a small pendant sparkling in the morning light. "Nice necklace," I said, my voice tight. "Gift from the party." She touched it, her face flushing, and said nothing. That silence was my answer, and it cut deeper than any words could. I left the kitchen, my steps heavy, and headed to my car. My phone buzzed, a text from Miles, my coworker, checking in after I'd mentioned my family drama at work yesterday. "You okay? Need to talk?" I didn't reply, not yet. I slid into the driver's seat, my hands shaking as I gripped the wheel. Their casual dismissal, that necklace, the crumpled invitation in my pocket, it all churned inside me, fueling a rage I'd never let myself feel before. I needed to get out to think, but the hurt was too raw, too heavy, and I knew this wasn't over. I drove away from my parents' house, the crumpled invitation still clenched in my hand, its edges biting into my palm. The suburbs faded into the city's gray sprawl, but the weight in my chest only grew heavier. I pulled into the parking lot of my marketing firm, the office's glass doors reflecting a version of me I barely recognized, eyes red, jaw tight. I needed to lose myself in work to drown out the echo of Mom's flippant tone, Dad's cold dismissal. Inside, the hum of keyboards and coffee machines felt like a lifeline. I dropped into my chair, my desk cluttered with sticky notes and campaign drafts. Miles, my coworker, glanced over from his cubicle, his brow furrowing. "Sadie, you look like hell." "What happened?" I forced a smile, but it cracked. "Just family stuff," I said, my voice thin. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "My dad pulled the same crap growing up. Always had an excuse. You want to talk?" I hesitated, then spilled it all: the missed dinner, Mom's text, the party they chose over me, the necklace that felt like a betrayal. Miles listened, nodding, his eyes steady. "My dad missed my high school graduation for a golf trip," he said. "Said it was a networking thing." I stopped expecting him to show up after that. His story hit too close, stirring a fresh wave of anger. I wasn't just hurt. I was furious at myself for hoping they'd change. I opened my laptop trying to focus, but my eyes caught on my bank app icon. I clicked it almost on instinct, and there it was, the automatic payment for my parents' mortgage scheduled to go out tomorrow. 3 years I'd been covering it ever since Dad's business tanked and they couldn't keep up. I'd drained my savings, skipped vacations, worked overtime to make it happen, and they couldn't even show up for my birthday. My phone buzzed again, Harper this time. "Sadie, why are you making this a thing? Mom and Dad were just being neighborly. You're overreacting." I stared at her message, my pulse hammering. Neighborly. She knew about the party and didn't tell me. My own sister siding with them, acting like I was the problem. I typed a reply, my fingers shaking. "You knew they were at a party and didn't say anything. Why are you covering for them?" Her response came fast, but it was vague, deflecting. "I didn't want to upset you. Let's talk later." I tossed my phone onto the desk, the clatter drawing a glance from Miles. I didn't care. Harper's betrayal stung worse than Mom's necklace, worse than Dad's words. She was supposed to be my ally, the one who got it, but she'd chosen their side, leaving me out in the cold. I stared at the bank app again, the mortgage payment glaring back. Every month I'd sent that money without question, thinking it was my duty, my way of keeping the family together. But what family? The one that left me alone at a restaurant table, the one that couldn't spare a call but had time for a neighbor's barbecue. My hands hovered over the keyboard, my breath shallow. I wanted to cancel the payment right then to make them feel the weight of their choices. Miles spoke up, his voice gentle. "You don't have to keep carrying them, Sadie. You're allowed to put yourself first." His words were a spark fanning the fire in my chest. I closed the app, not ready to act, but the thought of it burned bright. I couldn't stay here surrounded by the office's buzz with this anger choking me. I grabbed my bag and headed for the door, Miles calling after me. "Text me if you need me." I nodded, but my mind was already racing toward my parents' house again, the need for answers clawing at me, pushing me toward a confrontation I wasn't sure I was ready for. The drive back to my parents' house felt like wading through fog, the city lights blurring into streaks. My heart pounded, a rhythm of anger and resolve I couldn't shake. Harper's text defending them sat like a stone in my gut. I parked in their driveway again, the evening sky bruising purple. Their house glowed warm from the outside, a lie that made my skin prickle. I didn't knock this time. I walked in the door, unlocked, the air thick with the smell of roasted chicken. Mom was in the living room flipping through a magazine while Dad watched a baseball game, his feet propped up. They barely looked up as I stood in the doorway, my hands clenched. "We need to talk." Now I said, my voice sharp enough to cut through the TV's drone. Mom set her magazine down, her brow creasing. "Sadie, twice in one day. What's this about?" I stepped closer, my shoes loud against the hardwood. "It's about you missing my birthday. It's about you choosing a party over me. It's about me paying your mortgage for years while you treat me like I don't matter." My words tumbled out raw and unfiltered. Dad muted the TV, his face hardening. "You're blowing this out of proportion. You can't expect us to drop everything for you." His words were a match to gasoline. "Drop everything," I snapped. "I've given you everything. My savings, my time, my heart. And you can't even show up for one night." Mom stood, her hands smoothing her skirt, a nervous habit I hadn't noticed in years. "We appreciate your help, honey, but we never asked you to pay the mortgage. That was your choice." "My choice." The words hit like a punch, stealing my breath. I stared at her, searching for a flicker of guilt, but her eyes were steady, almost defiant. "My choice," I repeated, my voice trembling. "I did it because you were drowning after Dad's business failed. I did it because I thought we were a family." Dad leaned forward, his voice low. "We are a family, but you don't get to hold that over us like some kind of debt." I felt the room tilt, their words twisting something deep inside me. I'd spent years believing I was helping, keeping us together, but they saw it as an obligation I'd imposed on myself. My eyes burned, but I refused to cry. I walked to the kitchen, my steps unsteady, and grabbed a pen from the counter. My hand shook as I pulled a scrap of paper from a pile of grocery lists. I didn't think, just wrote, "If I'm not your priority, don't expect me to be yours." The words looked stark final on the faded paper. I set it on the table, my heart hammering so loud I thought they'd hear it. Mom followed me, her voice softer now. "Sadie, let's not do this. You're upset, but we can talk tomorrow." I turned, meeting her gaze. "Tomorrow's too late. I'm done waiting for you to care." I grabbed my bag, my chest tight with a mix of fury and something sharper like grief. Dad stood, his voice rising. "You walk out now. Don't expect us to chase you." I froze, his words a blade I hadn't seen coming. I wanted to scream to tell them how much they'd broken me, but my throat closed. I headed for the door, the note sitting like a bomb on the table, its weight pulling me under as I stepped into the night. The night air hit me like a wall. As I stumbled out of their house, my breath ragged, the note's words echoing in my skull. I slid into my car, the door slamming shut, but I couldn't start the engine. My hands shook too hard, my vision blurring with tears I refused to let fall. I gripped the steering wheel, trying to anchor myself, but Dad's threat, "Don't expect us to chase you," clawed at me, ripping open a wound I'd patched over for years. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a sharp vibration that made me flinch. It was a voicemail from Harper, left just minutes ago while I was inside. I hit play, her voice crackling through the speaker. "Sadie, I heard you're at Mom and Dad's. Stop making a scene. You're embarrassing yourself." Embarrassing myself. My sister, who'd dodged my birthday, who'd hidden their party, was calling me the problem. I deleted the message, my fingers numb, but the words lingered sharp as glass. I glanced back at the house, the warm light spilling from the windows, a cruel contrast to the coldness inside. My mind flashed to a memory I'd buried the summer I turned 16, when I overheard Mom at a family barbecue laughing with her friends. "Sadie's so independent, she doesn't need us hovering," she'd said, as if my strength was an excuse for their absence. I'd swallowed it, then, proud of being easy. Now it felt like a lie they'd told themselves to justify ignoring me. I opened my banking app, the screen glowing in the dark car. The mortgage payment stared back, a number that had defined my life for too long. I'd taken it on after Dad's business collapsed, when they'd sat me down, eyes wet, promising it was temporary. Temporary. 3 years later, I was still paying, still sacrificing, while they wore new jewelry and partied with neighbors. My thumb hovered over the cancel button, my heart racing. I wanted to do it, to make them feel this betrayal. But something stopped me, a flicker of guilt, or maybe fear. Then my phone lit up again, a text from Mom. "Sadie, you're being unfair. We've always supported you. Don't throw a tantrum over one night." Unfair. Tantrum. The words twisted the knife deeper, as if my pain was childish, as if my years of giving meant nothing. I imagined them inside, already back to their evening, Mom flipping her magazine, Dad cheering at the game, my note untouched on the table. They didn't care. They never had. I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat, my chest so tight I could barely breathe. A neighbor walked by, their dog tugging at the leash, and I ducked my head, ashamed of the tears now spilling despite my fight to hold them back. I wasn't just invisible to my family. I was a burden, a line item in their budget, a duty they resented. The realization crushed me heavier than any argument, any text. I sat there alone in my car, the world shrinking to the sound of my own uneven breaths, with no idea how to climb out of this hurt. I sat in my car outside their house, the engine off, the silence deafening after Mom's text and Harper's voicemail. My tears had dried, leaving a gritty sting in my eyes. I couldn't go back inside, couldn't face another round of their excuses. But I couldn't stay here either, frozen in their driveway, letting their words define me. My phone was still on the passenger seat, its screen dark. I picked it up, my hands steadier now, and opened the banking app again. The mortgage payment glowed on the screen, a number that had chained me for years. I stared at it, my thumb hovering over the cancel button. This wasn't just about money. It was about me choosing myself for once. I pressed cancel, my heart lurching as the confirmation popped up. No going back now. I exhaled a shaky breath, feeling a crack in the weight that had crushed me moments ago. I drove home, the city lights softer now, less accusing. My apartment welcomed me with its familiar creaks and shadows. I dropped my keys on the counter and sank onto the couch, the same spot where I'd spiraled last night. But this time, something felt different, a spark small but real, igniting inside me. I opened my laptop and transferred the mortgage money to a savings account I'd set up years ago for a trip to Iceland, a dream I'd shelved to keep my parents afloat. The balance grew, and so did that spark. My phone buzzed a text from Sienna. "You okay? Haven't heard from you." I didn't want to be alone with this decision, so I called her asking to meet at our favorite coffee shop. 20 minutes later, I was there, the smell of espresso grounding me. Sienna slid into the booth across from me, her eyes searching mine. "Talk to me, Sadie. What's going on?" I told her everything: the confrontation, Dad's threat, Mom's dismissal, Harper's voicemail calling me embarrassing. I told her about the note I left, the canceled payment. Her eyes widened, but she didn't interrupt. When I finished, she leaned forward, her voice firm. "You did the right thing. You've been their safety net too long. It's time to live for you." Her words were a lifeline pulling me towards something I hadn't felt in years: permission to prioritize myself. We ordered coffee, the barista's chalkboard catching my eye. "Choose yourself," it read, scrawled in bright blue. I almost laughed at the timing, the universe winking at me. "I'm done waiting for them to see me," I said, my voice low but steady. Sienna nodded, her smile small but proud. "Good. So what's next?" I sipped my coffee, the warmth spreading through me. "I'm saving for that Iceland trip. And I need to talk to Harper, really talk, not just let her dodge me." I pulled out a notepad from my bag, the same one I'd scribbled my anger in last night. This time, I wrote a letter to Harper, my pen moving fast but deliberate. I told her how her silence hurt, how her siding with our parents felt like a betrayal. I asked her to choose: stand with me or keep enabling them. The words felt heavy, final, but right. I sealed the letter, my hands calm now, a quiet strength building as I realized I was finally taking control. I folded the letter to Harper, tucking it into my bag, as the coffee shop's hum faded into the background. Sienna's eyes lingered on me, her silence encouraging. "You're different today," she said, stirring her latte. "Not louder, just stronger." I nodded, the weight of her words settling deep. I wasn't the Sadie who'd waited at that restaurant table hoping for scraps of attention. Canceling the mortgage payment, writing that letter. It was like stepping out of a skin I'd outgrown. I left the coffee shop, the late afternoon sun warm on my face. Back home, I sat at my kitchen table, the letter to Harper in front of me. I didn't mail it yet. I needed to sit with it to be sure. Instead, I opened my laptop and searched for Iceland travel packages, the images of glaciers and northern lights pulling me in. Each click felt like a rebellion, a reclaiming of the dreams I'd buried under my parents' needs. I booked a solo tour for next spring, my heart racing with a mix of fear and excitement. My phone stayed quiet. No calls from Mom or Dad, no follow-up from Harper. I decided to block their numbers just for a few days to carve out space for myself. The act felt drastic, almost cruel, but I needed it, a shield against their voices, their excuses. I leaned back in my chair, the wood creaking, and let the silence wrap around me. For the first time, it didn't feel heavy. It felt like freedom. At work the next day, I threw myself into a new project, a campaign for a local nonprofit. My desk was a mess of notes and coffee cups, but I didn't care. I pitched ideas in our team meeting, my voice clear, unshaken. Miles caught my eye after giving me a small nod. "You're killing it, Sadie," he said later, passing my cubicle. "Something's changed." I smiled, a real one, not the tight mask I'd worn for weeks. "Yeah," I said. "I'm trying to." I kept the letter to Harper in my bag, a quiet reminder of the line I'd drawn. I didn't need her to respond right away, but I needed her to know I wasn't invisible anymore. That evening I stopped by the post office, the letter's weight steady in my hand. I slid it into the mailbox, the metal clank echoing in the quiet lot. It wasn't about revenge. It was about truth, about saying I deserved better. Back at my apartment, I stood by the window watching the city settle into dusk. The skyline glowed, each light a small defiance against the dark. I thought of Iceland, of standing alone under a sky painted with colors I'd only seen in photos. My phone sat on the counter, still silent, and I didn't check it. I didn't need to. I turned away, my reflection faint in the glass, and for the first time in years, I saw someone who wasn't waiting for anyone else to show up. My apartment felt different that morning, like the air had shifted. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was mine, chosen. I'd mailed the letter to Harper and canceled the mortgage payment, and though my chest still ached, there was a lightness too, like I'd set down a load I hadn't known I was carrying. I sipped coffee at my kitchen counter, the mug warm against my palms, when my phone lit up. The screen showed 42 missed calls, all from my parents, starting at dawn. I didn't listen to the voicemails right away. I wasn't ready. Instead, I walked to a nearby park, needing space to breathe. The grass was damp, the air crisp with early fall. I sat on a bench watching joggers and dog walkers, their lives moving forward, while mine felt like it was teetering. My phone buzzed again, a voicemail notification. I played the first one, Mom's voice sharp. "Sadie, what's this note? You can't just stop paying the mortgage. Call us." The next was Dad, his tone gruff. "This is ridiculous. You're putting us in a bad spot. Fix this." No apology, no hint of understanding. Each message was a variation of the same anger demands, guilt trips. One from Mom even said, "We raised you better than this." I laughed, a bitter sound that startled a squirrel nearby. Raised me better? They'd raised me to give, to sacrifice, to expect nothing in return. I pocketed my phone and walked deeper into the park, the trees turning gold at the edges. A woman pushed a stroller past her toddler, giggling, and I felt a pang, not for a child, but for the kind of love that looked effortless. My parents' voicemails replayed in my head, their voices clawing at the strength I'd started to build. I stopped by a pond, its surface rippling under a light breeze. I wanted to feel powerful, but their desperation was a weight I hadn't expected. My phone buzzed again, this time a call from Harper. I let it go to voicemail, my hands clenching. When I played it, her voice was shaky, not angry. "Sadie, I got your letter. I didn't realize how much I hurt you. But this mortgage thing, you're tearing us apart. Please call me." Tearing us apart. As if I'd been the one skipping birthdays, choosing parties, dismissing pain. Her words stung, not because they were true, but because she still couldn't see me. I sat on the grass, my back against a tree, the bark rough through my jacket. The voicemails, Harper's plea, they were proof my actions had shaken them. But there was no remorse, no acknowledgement of my hurt. I'd hoped for something else, maybe a crack in their armor, a sign they'd fight for me. Instead, they fought for their house, their comfort. My throat tightened, not with tears, but with a hollow ache, like I'd reached for something and found only air. I left the park, the pond's ripples fading behind me, and walked back to my apartment, my phone heavy in my pocket. The voicemails had stopped, but the silence felt louder, more accusing. I didn't want to face my parents' voices again, not yet, so I set my phone to silent and opened my laptop. I needed something to anchor me, something mine. I found a website for a financial independence workshop, a local event starting next week. I registered, my fingers steady as I typed my name. A knock at my door jolted me. I opened it to find Harper, her face, pale eyes darting like she didn't want to be here. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice small. I nodded, stepping aside, my heart a mix of hope and wariness. She stood in my living room, arms crossed, not meeting my gaze. "I read your letter," she said, "and I saw the note you left at Mom and Dad's. You're really doing this, aren't you?" Doing what I asked, my tone even though my pulse quickened. Choosing myself. "Yeah, I am." She flinched, her fingers twisting the hem of her sweater. "You stopped the mortgage payment, Sadie. They're freaking out. They could lose the house." Her words were a plea, but they carried an edge, like I was the one breaking something sacred. I leaned against the counter, my hands gripping the edge. "They chose a party over my birthday, Harper. You did too. Why is their house my responsibility? She looked away, her jaw tight. You don't get it. They're stressed. They need us. I laughed a low, hollow sound. They need my money. They don't need me. Harper's eyes flicked to mine, then dropped to the floor. She didn't argue, didn't defend them, and that silence was worse than any fight. It was proof she knew I was right but couldn't admit it. I walked to my window, staring at the street below where a couple laughed as they carried grocery bags. I wrote you that letter because I wanted you to see me, I said, my voice quieter now. But you're still choosing them. Harper shifted her sneakers, scuffing the floor. I'm not choosing anyone, she muttered. I just don't want our family to fall apart. I turned, meeting her eyes. It already has. She left without another word, the door clicking shut behind her. I stood there, the room too still, my words hanging in the air. I checked my phone. Sienna had texted, asking how I was holding up. I started typing a reply, but a call from an unknown number interrupted. It was a bank advisor confirming the canceled payment. You're all set, she said, her voice neutral. Anything else I can help with? I thanked her and hung up, the finality of it sinking in. I sat on my couch, the same one where I'd spiraled after the birthday dinner. My parents' panic. Harper's visit, the bank's confirmation, they were ripples from my choice. But they didn't feel like victory. They felt like loss, like I'd traded one kind of weight for another. I looked at the workshop confirmation email, its promise of a fresh start, mocking the ache in my chest. I'd shaken their world, but mine was still crumbling, and I didn't know how to rebuild it alone. The morning after Harper's visit, my apartment felt quieter, like the world had paused to let me catch my breath. I woke early, the light soft through my curtains, and made tea instead of coffee, craving something gentler. I sat at my kitchen table, the mug's warmth seeping into my hands, and stared at the financial independence workshop email on my laptop. I'd signed up on impulse, but now it felt like a lifeline, a step toward a life that was mine alone. I drove to a local bookstore for the workshop, the city waking up around me, buses, rumbling, people hurrying to work. The bookstore was tucked between a bakery and a thrift shop, its windows lined with faded paperbacks. Inside, the air smelled of ink and old wood, comforting in a way I hadn't expected. About a dozen people sat in a circle, folding chairs, creaking as the facilitator, a woman named Nora, introduced herself. Her voice was calm, steady, like she'd seen her own share of storms. Nora asked us to share why we were here. I hesitated, my hands twisting in my lap, but when my turn came, the words spilled out. I've been carrying my family financially for years, I said, my voice low but clear. I stopped recently, and it's changed everything. The room was quiet, but their nods, their eyes told me they understood. A man named Victor spoke next, his voice rough. I cut off my brother after he kept asking for loans. Hardest thing I ever did. His story wasn't mine, but it echoed, and I felt less alone. The workshop was practical budgeting tips, boundary-setting strategies, but it was the stories that stayed with me. Nora talked about her own journey leaving a toxic family business, and her words hit deep. You can love people and still say no. I scribbled it in my notebook, the pen's scratch grounding me. For years I'd thought love meant giving everything, even when it left me empty. Now I saw a different kind of love, one that included me. I left the bookstore with a flyer for the next session, my steps lighter. Driving home, I passed a park where kids were playing soccer, their laughter sharp in the crisp air. I thought of my childhood, not the absences, but the small moments of joy. Mom braiding my hair before school, Dad sneaking me an extra cookie after dinner. Those memories didn't erase the hurt, but they softened it like sunlight filtering through a cracked window. I wasn't ready to forgive, not fully, but I could feel the anger loosening its grip. Back at my apartment, I pulled out a fresh journal, its pages crisp and untouched. I started writing not about the pain, but about those early years, Mom's laugh when I tripped over my own feet, Dad's terrible singing in the car. The words came slowly, each one a thread tying me to a version of them I'd almost forgotten. I wasn't excusing them, but I was letting myself remember they weren't always distant. It felt like reclaiming a piece of myself, one I'd buried under years of resentment. I set the journal down, my tea cold now, and stood by my window. The city hummed below, steady and alive. I felt it too, a quiet pulse, a sense that I was starting to rebuild, not just from their rejection, but from the version of me who thought she had to earn their love. I wasn't there yet, but I was moving, and that was enough for now. I closed the journal, its weight soft in my hands, and felt a quiet shift like a door creaking open. The city outside my window was settling into evening streetlights, flickering on, casting gold across the pavement. My phone buzzed a text from Tessa, an old friend I hadn't seen in years. "Heard you're going through stuff. Dinner tomorrow with some friends, you in?" I smiled, typing back a quick yes. Her invitation felt like a small bridge to a world beyond my family's shadow. The next night I met Tessa at a cozy diner, its booths packed with laughter and clinking plates. Her friends were warm, their stories spilling easily, work dramas, travel plans, silly dating mishaps. I listened, my shoulders loosening, and when they asked about me, I shared just enough. I was figuring out who I wanted to be. They nodded, no judgment, and Tessa squeezed my hand under the table. "You're gonna be okay, Sadie," she whispered. I drove home under a starless sky, the diner's warmth lingering. My phone lit up with a text from Harper. Her words hesitant. "I'm sorry for shutting you out. Can we talk soon?" I didn't reply right away, but I didn't feel the old sting either. Her apology was a start, not a fix, and I was okay with that. I'd spent so long chasing their approval, but now I was learning to stand still to let them come to me or not. At my apartment, I unblocked my parents' numbers, my finger hovering before pressing confirm. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but a choice to keep the door ajar. I didn't need their voices to define me anymore. I opened my laptop and browsed Iceland photos again, the glaciers glowing under a midnight sun. I added a hiking tour to my itinerary, imagining my boots crunching on snow, my breath visible in the cold air. The next day, I passed a coworker, Lila, in the office hallway. She'd overheard my family drama weeks ago and gave me a knowing look. "You seem lighter," she said, pausing by the coffee machine. I nodded, surprised she'd noticed. "Trying to be," I said, and we shared a quiet smile. Back at my desk, I pulled out the workshop flyer, its edges worn from being carried in my bag. I signed up for the next session, a small act, but it felt like planting a seed. That evening, I walked to my balcony, the city sprawling below, alive with its own rhythm. I thought of the Sadie who'd sat alone at that birthday dinner, waiting for a family who never came. She was still part of me, but I was more now someone who could choose her own path, who could find joy in small moments like Tessa's laugh or a stranger's kind words. I leaned against the railing, the cool metal steady under my hands, and let out a slow breath, feeling the world settle into place around me. A year had passed since that birthday dinner, and my apartment had become a sanctuary, not a cage. I woke to the soft hum of my alarm, the morning light filtering through new curtains I'd hung myself. My routine was different now. Yoga on the balcony, a slow breakfast with toast and jam, no rushing to check my phone for family texts. I'd built a life that felt like mine, piece by quiet piece, and it was enough to make me pause sometimes just to breathe it in. I'd started meeting my parents for coffee short visits on neutral ground. They were in therapy, their voices softer now, less defensive. Dad admitted last month he'd taken my help for granted, his eyes downcast as he stirred his espresso. Mom nodded her fingers, tracing the rim of her cup, and said they were trying to understand. It wasn't a full repair, but it was a start, and I didn't push for more. I'd learned trust takes time, like planting a garden you don't expect to bloom overnight. Harper and I met at a small cafe downtown, the kind with mismatched chairs and local art on the walls. She looked nervous, her hands fidgeting with a napkin. "I was wrong to shut you out," she said, her voice low. "I didn't know how to stand up to them without losing them." I listened, sipping my tea, and saw my sister, not just their shadow. "I'm glad you're here," I told her, and meant it. We weren't fixed, but we were talking, and that was a thread I could hold on to. Work had become a refuge, too. I'd taken on bigger projects, my desk now lined with plants I watered faithfully. Lila, my coworker, noticed the change, joking that I was the office's new green thumb. I laughed, feeling lighter, like I could be more than the woman who'd carried her family's weight. I'd saved enough for my Iceland trip, now just months away, and every time I checked my itinerary, my heart lifted at the thought of standing on a glacier alone but whole. Evenings were for me now. I'd started painting, nothing fancy, just watercolors on cheap paper, blending blues and greens, like the northern lights I'd soon see. The brush felt like an extension of my thoughts, a way to process without words. I'd sit by my window, the city's pulse steady below, and let the colors flow. It wasn't about perfection. It was about creating something that didn't belong to anyone else. I walked to my mailbox one afternoon, the air sharp with coming winter. A postcard from Tessa waited inside, a silly note from her recent trip to Maine. "Miss you, Sadie. Come visit," it read. I smiled, tucking it into my journal, a new one I'd bought after filling the last. My life wasn't loud or grand, but it was mine, built from small choices, quiet moments, and the courage to keep going. I stood there, the mailbox cold under my fingers, and felt the past settle like dust after a long storm. I boarded the plane to Iceland 5 months later. My backpack light, but my heart full. Tessa joined me, her chatter filling the cabin as we flew over endless ocean. When we landed, the air was sharp, clean, like it could cut through any lingering doubt. We drove to a coastal town, the cliffs jagged against a gray sky. I stood on a black sand beach, the waves crashing steady, relentless. In that moment, I wasn't my parents' daughter or Harper's sister. I was just Sadie, enough as I was. The northern lights came that night, ribbons of green and purple dancing above the fjords. I lay on a blanket, Tessa beside me, our breaths visible in the cold. I didn't need words to feel the weight of it, freedom not from my family, but from the need to be their everything. I'd spent years tying my worth to their approval, but here, under a sky that owed me nothing, I saw it clearly. I was whole without their validation. Back home, I kept meeting my parents, small steps toward something new. They'd started paying their own mortgage, a quiet acknowledgement of my boundaries. Dad called last week, his voice softer, asking about my trip. Mom sent a photo of her garden roses blooming despite the frost. I didn't rush to reply, but I didn't turn away either. Forgiveness wasn't a switch I could flip. It was a slow thaw, and I was okay with that. Harper and I were rebuilding too. We'd had long talks, raw and messy, about our roles in the family's cracks. She admitted she'd leaned on me too, letting me carry the weight while she stayed quiet. We weren't perfect, but we were honest, and that was enough for now. I framed Tessa's postcard on my desk, a reminder of chosen family, the kind that shows up without being asked. I still painted my watercolors, stacking up in a corner of my apartment. Each stroke was a choice, a way to build a life that didn't depend on anyone else's presence. I'd learned that strength isn't about cutting ties or winning fights. It's about knowing your worth, even when others don't see it, and choosing to live for yourself, one quiet step at a time. What's the hardest boundary you've ever set, and how did it change you? I'd love to hear your story in the comments. It's how we find each other, how we heal. If this story touched you, please hit like, subscribe, or share it with someone who needs it. Thank you for listening, for being here with me. Here's to finding our own light, no matter how dark the sky gets.